Please welcome to the stage Snehal Antani, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Horizon3.ai, and Bailey Bickley, Chief of DIB Defense at the NSA Cybersecurity Collaboration Center.
Good morning, everybody. It is so good to see you, or kind of see you. It's really bright up here. Thank you for coming to our talk. My name is Bailey Bickley. I am the Chief of DIB Defense at the NSA Cybersecurity Collaboration Center. And I wanted to start by saying that this is my first black hat. And it is a little bit awkward having NSA on my badge. People have been very nice to my face, but I can tell you're all just waiting to see if I eventually connect to the public Wi-Fi, so please knock it off. But in all seriousness, NSA has decades of history in cryptography, and so it is really, really good to be here with you in this community today. And what I'm gonna do is talk about three things. First, NSA's perspective on the defense industrial base, or the DIB. Second, our perspective on nation-state threats to the DIB. And then third, and most importantly, how we're working with industry to get after those threats. At the NSA 333, we have a fantastic legal team, and they asked me to tell all of you that they said hello, and also that my presence at this event, to include my subsequent remarks, does not equal endorsement in any way. So now that that's out of the way, let's get to it. When most people think about the defense industrial base, they call it the soft underbelly of our national security or our defense ecosystem. But I've been working in this space for about 4 years now, and I prefer to think about it as our backbone. Every single DoD weapon system, every network, every military operation is underpinned by a vast network of suppliers. And these are privately owned companies that are frankly under-resourced and overwhelmed by all of the malicious cyber activity hitting their networks. Our adversaries know that they can target the supply chain to steal United States intellectual property, research and development, military capabilities, to then build their own militaries and economies from. And when most people think about the defense industrial base, they think maybe of large defense contractors that have countless resources to defend against this type of activity. But the reality is the defense industrial base is 80% small businesses. These are companies that have outsourced IT, minimal IT staff, minimal awareness of security best practices. And I put on the screen, this is a real picture of one such DIB company. We went to visit their headquarters, and this company produces custom radio frequency solutions for DoD to use in very austere locations across the globe. And I don't know about for all of you, but when I went here, it was a surprise to me. Although they are an incredible manufacturer, their IT environment was maybe not quite what I had in mind for a defense contractor. But that picture literally represents the battle space that we now have to defend. And these are the companies that are actually facing off against nation-state-backed actors in what has fundamentally been a very unfair fight. And as the state of conflict changes, so does the DIB. The DIB is no longer a handful of traditional defense contractors, but it now includes a lot of companies from nascent and emerging industries, and I want to give a couple of examples of what I mean by that. The DIB includes AI companies whose models are being adopted for use in DoD applications. The DIB includes commercial transportation companies, and these are companies where the DoD is not their primary customer, but in times of conflict or crisis, they can get called upon to move lethal aid in and out of war zones. And the DIB also includes foreign-owned water, gas, telecommunications companies that are supporting all of our military bases overseas, and If you went to the keynote this morning, I thought there was a really good example of how the DIB could include drone companies or anti-drone companies. And so the battle space is really changing, and at DoD, at NSA, we recognized we needed to find new solutions that were really scalable to cover all of this new ground. I want to talk a little bit about the threats. China in particular. China's hacking resources outnumber those of the US and allies combined, and China has stolen more corporate data from the United States than any other nation in the world. This is a really important point. When we engage with small companies, they often think that what they do is not important enough to be targeted. But when you have the significant resources like that to conduct mass scanning and mass exploitation, there is no company and no target too small. I think we're all really familiar with China's IP theft, but now we're seeing them escalate into pre-positioning in US critical infrastructure to potentially conduct disruptive cyber operations at a time and place of their choosing. And I think this community has rightfully talked a lot about Volt Typhoons living off of the land techniques, and I think that's really important. But there's been less discussion about their favorite initial access vectors, which remain simply exploiting internet-facing, publicly known, unpatched vulnerabilities. So they don't actually have to use costly and bespoke 0 days when we make it easy on them. And they are getting really good at using AI to find and exploit unpatched instances of these vulnerabilities at scale. So for us, that means we need to use AI and automation first, fast, and for defense. So a little bit about where I'm from. At the NSA Cybersecurity Collaboration Center, we were created to work with industry on shared problems in cyber, and we have two focuses. First, through our foreign intelligence mission at NSA, we have very unique insights on nation-state actors, what they're doing in cyber, and we want to share those insights at the unclassified level with industry, because industry is the ones that are building, operating, and defending all of the systems that we depend upon. So we want to share those insights with them quickly at a classification level that's actionable, so they can use those insights to build better products, to build and scale detection and mitigation techniques against emerging nation-state activity. The second thing that we've done with industry is we've worked with up-and-coming companies to offer their capabilities to small businesses within the defense industrial base so that we can raise their level of network security. And that's one thing that we've been doing with Horizon 3 through the CAPT program, or Continuous Autonomous Penetration Testing program, which is a mouthful. But we were calling it the Autonomous Penetration Testing program, and we started to get inquiries about NSA's APT program, and so we realized very quickly that that would not fly, and so we needed to change the name. So with CAPT, we worked with Horizon 3 to offer NodeZero to 200 defense contractors that were very likely to be targeted. We saw those companies conduct over 20,000 hours of pen testing because we were able to make it automated and accessible for them. They found 50,000 vulnerabilities. Of those vulnerabilities, they mitigated more than 70% with a mean time to patch that was significantly faster than the industry standard. So we ultimately worked with Horizon 3 to expand that and scale it to more companies. And as I start to close and transition to my colleague, I want to give a couple of examples of the impact that it's having already. As just one example, a research and development DIB company joined our program in January of this year. This company had multiple contracts with various parts of the Department of Defense. They onboarded, got access to the platform, and they ran a pen test against their internal networks. In 5 minutes, NodeZero was able to access a file share with over 3 million files, including very sensitive information related to nuclear-powered submarines and aircraft carriers. 5 minutes. I've literally had Outlook crashes that have lasted longer than that. And just one more example, if I was to refer to 2023, CB 2023-20198, I would assume that most of you know what I'm referring to because this is Black Hat. You would know that that's a 2-year-old Cisco iOS XE vulnerability, but that it's been very recently used in Salt Typhoon hacking operations. But again, I would ask you to put yourself in the shoes of this company. They're not thinking about 2-year-old vulnerabilities. They're thinking about building the best antenna for DoD that money can buy. And that is the value that we can add from a national security agency perspective, from industry's perspective, when we are able to share insights on what we're seeing in the threat environment, flag things for these companies so they can stay on top of it. So as I close, we saw emerging exploitation of this vulnerability. We were able to immediately search within the companies enrolled in our program to find 150 of them that were vulnerable. We picked up the phone, called them, and essentially gave them context and attribution as to why they needed to patch immediately, and also through the tool, we're able to tell them exactly where on their network the vulnerability existed and the steps they needed to take to remediate it. Within 48 hours, almost 95% of the companies that we reached out to had patched before any kind of known exploitation or compromise. And so that's the impact that we're trying to have over and over again. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Snehal Antani, who is our partner in NSA's CAPT program and the CEO of Horizon 3.
Thank you so much. It's an amazing example of public-private partnership. I had left industry as Splunk CTO to go serve within the Department of Defense, tremendous passion for the mission, and understand how hard it is to make sure that those downrange are given the best capabilities and they're given the unfair advantage that they deserve to have. And cybersecurity risk in the supply chain is just the long tail of risk that we've accrued over time that we've got to go do something about. And with that said, it's never been tougher to be a CIO or a CISO than today. Not only do you have to secure yourself, your enterprise IT infrastructure, your on-prem environment, your SaaS environment, your cloud environment, now you've got to deal with vibe-coded applications that are suddenly popping up on your network. You've got to worry about data leakage into ChatGPT and other LLMs that are out there. And now you've got to also secure yourself and your distributors, because I don't have to attack you directly. Can I steal your IP from your suppliers? Can I disrupt your manufacturing process from your suppliers? Can I swim from your suppliers into your environment? Because that's the way attackers think. When you think about something as complex as a fighter jet or an aircraft carrier or a GPU chip or a car, any sort of finished good, you've got a very complex supply chain that's involved. And attackers can take the time to understand what that supply chain is, who's dependent on whom, and then use a variety of techniques to precisely target the weakest links in that chain. And so the question is, what do you do about it? In cybersecurity, the only perspective that matters is the attacker's perspective. That's it. What does your environment look like through the eyes of the attacker, and how do you use that perspective to fix problems that actually matter? And when you think about the attacker's perspective, the difficulty up until now was scaling that perspective across your environment. Because traditionally, you'd have to go off and convince the boss to go spend money on a pen test. You would then spend weeks preparing for folks to show up and make sure that you're hardened so you do a good job and you look good. And then, of course, the pen test team's going to show up and take you to school almost immediately. I don't know if it's too soon for this meme, but we'll get there. And then finally, this year's results look exactly like last year's results. And now you've got to convince your boss that all that money you spent on cybersecurity was actually meaningful in reducing your risk. And so the question is, what role or what is the power that AI pen testing brings to the table? And a good way to understand that power is using something like Goad as a cyber range. So Goad is the game of Active Directory. It's a well-known cyber range that expert pen testers use to build their skills on credential attacks. And when you think about Goad Hard, which is the harder implementation, there's no unpatched servers, like no old CVEs, there's no legacy protocols. It's a legitimately difficult range to go off and compromise. And the reason why this is hard, not only for humans, but especially for algorithms, is you've got to deal with multi-step exploits. I compromise machine 1, and something from machine 1 is combined to take over machine 2. Something from machine 2 abuses a trust relationship to move into the next domain. You've got to reason over specific files you gained access to. And you can't just regex your way through that. You've actually got to understand the content. How do you pull credentials from sysvol and other examples like that? You've got to be able to discover abuse and abuse trust across the environment. And you've got to be able to do this with no prior knowledge and no humans in the loop or on the loop, without having humans nudge this along. And the question is that possible? It takes an expert pen tester, from our experience, 12 to 16 hours to fully solve the goad range. And you can go try this yourself. If you're a pen tester, go download Goad Hard, go set up the 5 VMs and see how long it takes for you to compromise all 3 domains. And if you're a junior pen tester, give that a try. And that's kind of the human effort. For NodeZero, it fully solved the goad range in 14 minutes and 25 seconds. No humans involved, no prior knowledge, full compromise of all the hosts, all 3 domains, abuse trust, and so on and so forth. And so what that shows you is that the power of AI for pen testing, or AI for offensive operations, hits in 3 areas: speed, scale, and thoroughness. When you take 14 minutes and 25 seconds versus 720 minutes or 12 hours as a human, suddenly that AI pen tester is 50x faster than the human. So now you're talking about a blitzkrieg-style cyber attack where you can come in and compromise. The second part is I can go spin up 1 offensive operation or 1 pen test, but with a few clicks, I can go off and start to spin up many more. I have infinite cyber capacity. So suddenly I can spin up 100,000 operations in minutes. So if you've got a long, complicated supply chain, traditionally humans were the bottleneck in attacking that chain at scale. Now suddenly I can spin up enough offensive operations and attack all of those suppliers all at once or in sequence with minimal human effort. The third part of this is thoroughness. Traditionally, with a human, you'd have had to select what part of the environment to go off and attack because, once again, humans are the bottleneck. They are the precious resource of expertise. But with AI for pen testing and AI for offensive cyber, suddenly I can comprehensively attack your environment. I've got the ability to conduct reconnaissance at scale, enumeration at scale, fingerprinting at scale. I can understand interesting choke points because I understand the context of how I can move from one machine to the other. I can start on-prem, pivot into the cloud. I can start in the cloud, pivot on-prem, pull an auth token for Slack, and then pull all the Slack data from your file share, so on and so forth. So speed, scale, and thoroughness completely changed the game. So here's some data behind that. So the pilot program then expanded out to be about 600 defense industrial base suppliers over the past 12 months, and it continues to grow. We ran roughly 9,000 pen tests over that period of time. And legit pen tests, not vuln scans masked as a pen test, but actual attacks. Time to credential compromise, because remember, attackers don't have to hack in, they'll log in. The fastest in that group was 5.5 minutes. Okay, pretty interesting. You might have a shot at detecting that credential abuse and do something about it. What's interesting is the tactics. Most of those tactics to compromise those credentials didn't require CVEs. Credential spraying, cracking NTLM hashes cracked on the wires. 20% of the initial credentials we compromised were domain admin credentials, which means we got keys to the kingdom almost immediately. Okay, but 5.5 minutes, you can do something about it. Our fastest time to domain compromise, 77 seconds. If you run a SOC, and if you cannot detect, respond, and stop this in 76 seconds, it's game over. Now think about your own security operations centers. Can you do that in 76 seconds? Because at second 77, I've got domain admin. I can lock you out, shut you down, steal all your data, and do whatever I want in your environment. The future of cyber warfare is algorithms fighting algorithms with humans by exception. Now, the median time was 13 minutes, with an average number of steps chained together being between 5 and 7, depending on the environment. So within 13 minutes, I'm chaining together misconfigured credentials, harvested credentials, misconfigured servers, ineffective security tools, all in order to achieve domain compromise. Time to compromise an enter user, the fastest, 52 seconds. What's shocking to me was the time to compromise an AWS user credential was 89 minutes. So we always think about cloud security and the risk of that. But in all of our data, AWS or cloud native environments are inherently more secure because of the fewer moving parts and fewer knobs and levers and so on and so forth. And now the question is, how do we defend faster? Gone are the days when we can just run a vuln scan, we can run an annual pen test, we can go do a tabletop exercise and think that we're secure. That's what this new world has proven to us, and especially with the data from the DIB. And what we saw with those defense industrial base suppliers and the rest of our customers was this shift towards continuously assessing your environment, fixing problems that actually mattered, and quickly running retests to verify that you're good to go. Don't just show me you've got a problem, show me that you've actually fixed it. And that's the goal of a pen test. The goal of a pen test is not to find problems. That's the legacy way to think about it. The goal of a pen test is to fix problems that matter. Because the hardest part of my job as a CIO was deciding what not to fix, and then convincing my team they had to skip their kid's basketball game or skip their dinner and patch a bunch of servers we knew weren't even exploitable, but they showed up on some vuln scanner list somewhere else. Now suddenly what's exploitable is actually what you're going to go off and prioritize, and being able to clearly prove you were exploitable and now you're not. Now, of course, your environment's always changing, and that might change tomorrow. So for every patch Tuesday, how do you create a pen test Wednesday? Every time your network environment changes, how do you run a pen test to verify that you're not exploitable? And what this does is allows you to start to rethink risk-based vulnerability management. Because when I was a CIO, I had vulnerability management lists that would come in. We'd apply a bunch of math to it, and I'd have a slightly less crappy vulnerability management list, because it was all theoretical. And what I wanted to get to was, okay, am I exploitable? Of the ways that I'm exploitable, are there actually known threat actors using those tactics? And what is the precise business impact that could happen if we actually got popped? Because I've got to be able to tell this story to my boss in a way that marshals resources, that adjusts priorities. I can't just say we've got business operations risks. I've got to be very precise and say an attacker can compromise accounts receivables credentials, gain access to accounts receivables systems, and interdict or steal financial payments. Would you like to accept that risk, or do you want me to change priorities and do something about it? That's the level of precision we've got to have as security practitioners to get the resources necessary to get the job done. And you've got to be able to tell this story from, we're exposed to an active MQ problem. Salt Typhoon is known to abuse that problem. That problem led to ransomware exposure, which led to complete loss of operational control in my environment. If you're a hospital CIO, this means you can't pull blood from the blood bank. You've just locked everything down. Now you can start to think about meaningful business risk and prioritize accordingly. So in the DIB and broader in our customers, this is the window of time that they start to focus on as they shift from running 1 or 2 pen tests a year to 40 or 50 pen tests a month. What they'll do is now they've got the finding. How do they shrink that window as quickly as possible? The first thing, my SIM or EDR, did you detect us? Did you log us? Did you alert on us? Did you stop us? If not, why not? What happened? And what do I do to tune my EDR to make sure that it's actually doing its job and preventing things like credential dumping? And so we'll actually tell you, of all of the ways we dropped an implant on your host, your EDR didn't stop us. Here are the things that it permitted. Go make sure that you've configured your EDR correctly. Or that your SIM is missing a bunch of logs because we went through and you didn't see anything that we were doing. You suddenly have a very actionable set of things for your SOC team to go off and tune their tools on and get the most out of your investment there. The next part is, while breaking into your house, we'll install Ring cameras along the way. The hardest part of deception is not the honey tokens. It's where to put them, and make sure you're putting them in parts of the network that actually matter. So we use our pen test results as a map and compass for exactly where to put those honey tokens, those fake AWS credentials, those fake Azure tokens, fake SQL dump files, onto hosts that we've compromised, data shares that we've compromised, and so on. And now suddenly you've got this high fidelity early warning network whose alerts can be directly routed into the SOC. And with those alerts, you can start to build very precise workflows around incident response and threat hunting. A new thing that we see with our customers, while breaking into your house, we notice that the door jamb is scuffed up. Maybe an attacker was already there. Go trigger incident response processes and threat hunting processes. Now you're pen testing and threat hunting at the same time. The whole goal here is offense drives defense. Offense helps make sure you're fixing problems that matter. When you think about reducing the blast radius, we compromised a credential. That credential allowed us to do a whole bunch of things. How do you quickly reduce the role of that credential? Or your network was wide open. How do you use that to start to define how you should segment your network and reduce the blast radius? All while in parallel, you're opening tickets, you're mitigating or patching servers, fixing misconfigurations, and then quickly closing those tickets. What's amazing in this pilot program and now the full program with CAPT, and what we see not only with the DIB but the rest of our install base, is a laser focus on this window, and the attackers are only getting faster. So how do you shrink this window so you're detecting in 76 seconds or even better now? So with that, in the final part, remediation is the biggest bottleneck. And what I see as amazing is the role of MCP servers to completely transform how you start to quickly fix problems. And I think pen testing and SOAR are going to quickly converge into an integrated experience. And so for those that don't know what MCP servers are, think of that as a ChatGPT interface into your environment. So here's the example. You get a syskev out that hits the newswire. There's a Langthrow vulnerability. This is known to be exploited. You can now, with an MCP server using NodeZero, start to ask, I just want to run a pen test against Kubernetes. You don't even have to log into the product. And the MCP server understands how to interrogate our APIs and figure out how to actually run that pen test. And then from there, it's going to scope the pen test. You're going to get it running against your Kubernetes environment. You can actually see the pen test running in our portal if you wanted to actually log in. Now you've got the pen test results. You can pull the weakness summary. You can pull our recommended fix actions. You can use those paired with your favorite Copilot tool to actually generate the fixes. And then you can push those fixes out with the MCP server for Argo or whatever other deployment tools you have in place. And then you can use the MCP server in this interface to actually run a retest. Okay, now prove that this thing is good to go. And as you generate that remediation, you push out the information for the retest, you can automatically start to set a schedule. Suddenly, the product is headless. The entire workflow is designed for the human, or more importantly, designed for agents to be able to interact and invoke. So what I see as I wrap up here is find, fix, verify underpins autonomous pen testing. And the faster that loop, the more secure you are over time, as we've seen in the data. With MCP server, now you get into agentic workflows for actually fixing stuff. And you start to fix stuff even faster. I call that fix ops, or you can call that CTEM, or you can call that purple teaming. The point is quickly fix stuff that matters in your environment. Show your results over time, and then prove to your boss that you're a boss. I hope this talk was meaningful. I hope you got some value out of it. We've got our booth downstairs. Come by, hang out. We've got some good chocolate and some good demo videos. Bailey and I will be hanging out down there as well if you want to catch up and talk to us. But thank you for the time.